What's up and welcome back to another video, guys. Today I want to go over all of the different information that we have regarding the UCS Death Star that's going to be coming out on October 1st. We have a ton of different things to talk about. We know stuff about the minifigures that are going to be included in the set, as well as the build itself and even the promo that's going to be coming out alongside it when you buy it in October. So without further ado, let's get right on into this video. Now, as for the basic information regarding this set that I'm sure most of you already know is that it says 75419 is going to be retailing for $999.99 with 38 minifigures and 9,019 pieces, making this the largest LEGO Star Wars set ever made and the most expensive LEGO set ever made, the first one to reach $1,000. Technically, the Millennium Falcon was $1,040 if adjusted to inflation for today, but that doesn't really count because it's the first one to actually read out $1,000 on the price tag. And as for its 38 minifigures, breaking yet another record with the most LEGO Star Wars minifigures in a set. The previous record was held by the previous Death Star with 27 minifigures, and this blows that one out of the water. So there's a lot to be excited about regarding this set, so let's get right on into this video. Starting off with the actual build of the Death Star, we can almost guarantee that it is going to be the Death Star 1. I'm saying this because it makes no sense that it would be a Death Star 2, especially with the screen time and how this set is related to the first of the original trilogy. So it just doesn't really make sense that it would be a Death Star 2, which is why everyone is saying it's going to be a Death Star 1, and I definitely agree with this. It's going to have removable panels, which will allow you access to the interior, which will have a bunch of different rooms. Some of the rooms that you can expect are most likely the trash compactor, as well as the detention block and a hangar bay, which is going to hold some sort of vehicle. We don't know what that's going to be, we just know that it is going to be in there, as well as a Palpatine's throne room that's going to be very similar to the Palpatine's throne room diorama. Now, all of these rooms get me very excited, being very iconic to the Death Star, the movies, as well as the previous LEGO Death Star sets that we have gotten, because those on their own are very iconic for LEGO Star Wars, and this is definitely, hopefully does it justice with these rooms. I'm hoping that there is some fun play features in here, although this definitely isn't going to be a playset at that $1,000 price tag. It's going to be with all of the 18+ branding, so it is going to have kind of a boring box. I do think the 18+ boxes are a bit boring, but I still think this should have some fun play features, especially with the hangar and the trash compactor. So I'm excited to see all of these different rooms, and I'm hoping that LEGO does them all justice and that they look good and also have some fun play features. Now on to the part of this set that most people are very excited for regarding the minifigures. Now coming in at 38 minifigures, which is just a crazy number of minifigures, and we can expect all of the usual suspects, multiple different stormtroopers, TIE pilots, as well as Luke and Han with probably different variants. I would assume that we would get some different variants of Luke and Han, as well as Leia, Chewbacca, Darth Vader, Emperor Palpatine. I could sit here and list people off, but some of the things that I would love to see would definitely be a couple of the different officers, as well as the named officers. I think we should be getting a bunch of officers because there were a ton on the Death Star, and I'm hoping that they all have dual molded legs. It's kind of expected of a $1,000 set, but knowing LEGO, there's a chance that they don't. But one that I would love to see other than a Grand Moff Tarkin would definitely be an Admiral Yularen, especially because he is going to have a very prevalent role in Andor Season 2, which is coming out this year. So I would love to see some tie in that to the Death Star. I know there is kind of a rumor going around that there's going to be a Director Krennic in this UCS Death Star, which we'll talk about a little bit later when we can talk about its tie-in to Andor and Rogue One, as the new season of Andor is coming out. And I actually do suspect LEGO to have some bit of tie-in because, the show is about the Death Star. There's a lot of tie-ins to the Death Star with that, especially with Season 2. So I'd be excited to see that. I'm really hoping that all of these different officers do have dual molded legs. Like I was saying earlier, it's expected, but knowing LEGO, it's definitely something that could be overlooked. And then I think one more thing to note about the minifigures is that it is also going to include the count of all of the different droids and mouse droids, which will probably make up at least 8 to 10 of the minifigures in there. Not a bad thing. I think that the astromech droids are very cool, as well as the mouse droids and some gonk droids. You gotta have them in. They have to be there to man the Death Star. So I'm very excited to see this, and I think the sky's the limit when it comes to these 38 minifigures, and we have some more interesting stuff to talk about regarding those minifigures and how they could tie into Andor and Rogue One in a little bit. One concern I have about this build, though, is the fact that with 9,000 pieces, this build is going to be so heavy. Not to mention, it's a sphere, so it's going to roll. It's going to be very hard to display. So that brings me to believe that there's going to have to be some sort of Technic stand on the interior. I'm assuming that it's going to be made out of a Technic base, and then, the panels built around it, like some of the previous builds have been. And it's going to, Technic rods that attach into some sort of display stand. It's definitely something that's going to be needed. 9,000 9,000, this is not going to be a light set. It's going to be very heavy, very big, and with it being a sphere, it's going to be very hard to balance. So I'm hoping that LEGO is able to make that. I'm assuming they can. LEGO is very good at making display stands. It's like one of their big things, especially with the Technic. So this is going to definitely have some Technic supports to hold it upright. And as for that support, it's going to be, you know, the normal kind of black display. We're going to be getting our display plaque. But with 38 minifigures, are we going to get a minifigure display stand? We've been getting those very often with our recent UCS sets, so it wouldn't really make me think differently for this set. But with 38 minifigures, that thing's going to have to be so long. It's going to be over a foot long to have all of those minifigures. Unless they do it something where it's like tiered and they can stand up behind each other, I think that would be so cool. But LEGO has never done something like that for a UCS LEGO Star Wars set, so I don't know if it's something that would change here. It would be kind of fitting though. I think it would look great, and I'm just not sure if they're going to include a stand for these minifigures or if we're just going to be expected for them to, you know, stay inside of the Death Star. Either way, I'm very happy about it, and I'm very intrigued to see how they're going to stand this massive Death Star up on one little display stand. Now, there's been a rumor going around that there is going to be a Director Krennic minifigure in the UCS Death Star, and I definitely agree with this. I think it is very likely given his prevalence in Andor Season 2 as well as Rogue One. Also, you know, his kind of off-screen appearances in the Legends continuity, where he is, you know, very tied into the Death Star project. So I think it's very likely that we do get a Director Krennic, and I'm super hopeful that we do, because it's been so long since our previous one with the release of the Rogue One sets, and I think Director Krennic, being a very cool character, definitely has a lot of merit to appear in this set. Now, there are a ton of people out there who really want this set to be tied into Rogue One and get more Rogue One themed minifigures. However, I don't really think that we're going to get that many other than Director Krennic and potentially a Galen Erso, which would be so sick. We've never gotten one in LEGO form at all. And, you know, being the one who, you know, worked on and basically created the Death Star would be so sick to see. And we've never gotten a minifigure of him, like I said. So this would be the perfect opportunity. But as for the other characters for Rogue One, yes, the whole story of Rogue One was getting the plans for the Death Star, but spoiler alert, all those characters are dead before, you know, the Death Star kind of got taken down. So there's not really an opportunity to get, you know, a Cassian Andor or a Jyn Erso in the Death Star. It just doesn't make sense, and I don't think that LEGO would include them in the set. However, I do think there is a lot of opportunity to get that Director Krennic as well as a Galen Erso, which would be super, super sick, especially because they will potentially be seen in Andor, and they did play big roles in the, you know, the making of the Death Star. So I'm really hopeful that we do see these two minifigures make an appearance in the Death Star, and I think that it is pretty likely. Now, going back to some of the accessories that are going to be a part of this Death Star, the first one is going to be some sort of mini ship outside to put it in scale. I'm not sure if I'm reading that right, but I'm assuming, you know, it's something that they've done in the past, and I'm assuming it's going to be a Super Star Destroyer, just a little mini build that's connected with some trans-clear piece, and it's going to just hang off the side. And I think this is really cool. It will definitely, you know, bring the scale of the Death Star into, you know, perceiving. Obviously, this isn't going to be a minifigure scale Death Star, because that would be just massive, like uncomprehendable. But having, you know, the Star Destroyer in there just being like a little tiny speck on the side will be so cool just to see and get that scale and kind of bring you in. I think it'll be a great inclusion. Now, there is, you know, maybe a Vader's TIE Advanced is going to be in the hangar here. There is, you know, a rumor going around that there is going to be a hangar and there is going to be a vehicle inside of that hangar. And when looking back to the previous Death Stars, we have gotten those little mini Vader's TIE Advanced, which I think would be very cool. It's kind of like paying homage to the previous Death Stars, which, you know, were a big part of LEGO Star Wars, and I could definitely see this happening. I think Vader's TIE Advanced is very, very cool. The only issue is, you know, being very downsized to actually fit inside the hangar of the Death Star, because it is going to have to be not minifigure scale, but it is going to be very cool, and to see if we end up getting this or not, Vader's TIE Advanced being something that is a great ship. Now, I do think it's also possible this vehicle could just be a normal TIE fighter, or just some other sort of vehicle that is in there, like maybe something to carry around cargo and stuff in the hangar. But either way, I think it's very cool, and I'm excited to see what they do for that space. Now, we have some odd news here regarding the gift with purchase. It's going to be going alongside the UCS Death Star, and you know, originally this was kind of going around that it was going to be a Darth Vader's lightsaber, which would make a lot of sense, you know, given, you know, the history of LEGO Star Wars, and their recent UCS sets have all had that lightsaber promo. But now it leans toward, you know, the leak is right now is that it's going to be set 75419 with 236 pieces and 3 minifigures, being a TIE fighter. And this just doesn't make a lot of sense to me. First off, 236 pieces for a TIE fighter is insanely low. Looking toward the previous TIE fighter, which, you know, was double the pieces and was already downsized. Now I understand this is a gift with purchase and it isn't going to be the size of a normal set. However, you know, for $1,000, the gift with purchase, I think it should be kind of near the size of a normal set. 'Cause it's a lot of money to be forking over for a set. And, you know, getting 3 minifigures here. So first off, the piece count being super low and doesn't really warrant a TIE fighter in my opinion. And the minifigures in a TIE fighter, what are they going to be that isn't already going to be in the Death Star? It just doesn't make sense to me because the Death Star is already going to have stormtroopers, TIE pilots, officers, Darth Vader, like I said earlier, all of the main suspects and all of the people that would appear in a TIE fighter gift with purchase. So that's why I'm very skeptical of this leak. Now don't get me wrong, it's come from reputable sources, so I'm not going to sit here and say that it's not true. All of the, you know, signs are pointing toward this being the gift with purchase as of right now, and I just think it's very disappointing. I think it's a missed opportunity looking toward these lightsaber promos that a lot of people are big fans of. The builds, I know a lot of people don't like the fact they are locked behind, you know, promo walls, which I agree with. I think this should just be a set line on its own, just the lightsaber hilts. But I think Darth Vader has, you know, one of the coolest lightsaber hilts in all of Star Wars, and it's one that people have wanted for such a long time, and we're not going to get it. And, you know, the golden opportunity with the Death Star getting, you know, Darth Vader's lightsaber. You know, we've gotten Luke's, we've gotten Yoda's, and I think it's time that we get a Darth Vader's lightsaber, and I think this was the perfect opportunity for us to get it, and it's nowhere to be found. And I just think it's very disappointing to be getting some sort of TIE fighter build with this, which just doesn't make a ton of sense to me. Like I said before, the piece count is so low, the minifigure kind of lineup doesn't make sense unless this TIE fighter has little to no relation to the Death Star, but then again, it's the gift with purchase for the Death Star, so it would have to have some sort of correlation. So I'm not really sure. I think it's just something that we're going to have to wait and see with time. I'm really hoping that this is incorrect and it ends up being the Darth Vader's lightsaber hilt, or even like a Palpatine's lightsaber hilt or something like that. Would have just been so cool. So it's a little bit unfortunate here, but it is looking like it is going to be that TIE fighter, which does kind of suck in my opinion. That is going to do it for this video, and that is all of the current information that we have regarding the UCS Death Star. Let me know what your thoughts are down below in the comments about this set, if you think it's worth the $1,000, and if it's one that you're going to pick up once the images come out. And like I said, this is all kind of very early in like the leak and rumor stage, so a lot of this is most likely very subject to change, and some of the stuff I'm really hoping is the change, especially regarding that promo. But if you want to stay up to date on all of the leaks and rumors, make sure to subscribe to this channel and hit that notification bell so you're first notified when I make a new video covering this, because this hasn't been the first video I've made about the Death Star, and I'm most certainly sure that it's not going to be the last, because these leaks and rumors change very often. Thank you all so much for watching. Stay safe. Drew signing out.